13 miles down the track from Owensboro and 1 mile from the Henderson County line, Newman, Kentucky was founded with the railroad and prospered as a farming community. Once the home of the Daviess County Fair, it is known largely today for the paper mill operated by Kimberly Clark. Newman was established as Worthington Station around 1890. The settlement was built around a depot on the Louisville, St. Louis and Texas Railroad. It was renamed for Nathaniel Newman, a magistrate and businessman, to avoid confusion with another Worthington in Jefferson County. In those early years, Newman was a bustling place with 2 general stores, 2 doctors, a hotel and saloon. But it became known for a horrific train wreck that occurred in 1902 when an eastbound locomotive hit a bull on the tracks near the depot. Local historian Grady Ebelhair describes the scene.
There was 10 cars that crashed. There was 4 cars that stayed on the track, but the train when it came off the track, it knocked the railroad depot completely, demolished it. The roof hit the roof, and the roof landed right here by this road, and the roof stayed intact. 2 people got killed. There was 2 others hurt. They called the Cloverport where they had their service station for the trains. They sent down a train with a bunch of men. They literally built a new track around this whole area right here, and in 7 hours' time, they laid the new tracks so the trains could go past the next day while they were cleaning up the mess. And they had this place cleaned up in 7 days. They had, for 2 days, 2 or 3 days, it was such a mess here that people would ride trains out of Owensboro and Henderson, just ride by just to see it, because back then nobody had a car or a truck, or they wouldn't ride a horse. So this was like a tourist attraction. But it was a mess to clean up, but they got it all straightened up, and they got the track back in order.
In 1909, G.A. Jett and W.E. Morris were drilling for oil and hit a pocket of mineral water that was said to have healing properties. Articles of incorporation were filed with the county clerk to sell the water. With capital stock of $20,000, Newman was on its way to becoming a health resort, but it wasn't meant to be.
And they were going to build a sanitarium and a hotel, and if you come in there and buy your water, and it lasted about a year, but they never built the hotel or the sanitarium. It just kind of fell off. It wasn't what it cracked up to be. It's kind of they were trying to raise a lot of money, and it failed.
Just west of Newman in August of 1918, near the county line, the Red Cross held a picnic on the old Keene farm. It was a fundraiser, but also an opportunity to hear about the war effort. The Owensboro Messenger called it the greatest picnic ever held in the county. Longtime Sheriff Keith Kane shares this account of that day.
The picnic, according to records in the Owensboro Messenger, covered an area of about 15 acres. The Glenmore Distillery provided 32 carpenters that came in and built 30-plus structures, 3 huge tents, the serving table that they served the barbecue on that was said to have been 200 feet long. There were 6 cutting tables. They cooked 200 sheep, 50 hogs, and 1,000 chickens. And they fed over 15,000 people. And it was, from all accounts, it was something they brought people in from Owensboro and other locations via the trains. And it apparently was something to really behold. Now it's just a field with crops in it. But anyway, something pretty interesting to note.
Today, the Newman Baptist Church is the focal point of this community, organized in 1910. Kane is a member of the church.
Church came into being as a result of revival meetings that were taking place in one of the residents here, the Waite family, and was conducted by the Jett sisters, Margaret and Nina Jett. And those revivals were very common back then, tent revivals and things of that nature. This church was born. And so this church has been here where you see it standing now since 1910. But although the property was donated by the Jett family, it was probably about 7 years, I think 1917, before they actually were able to erect the building. But it was almost destroyed, like many locations and structures during the 37th flood, the flood of 1937. The flood of 37, the water would have got up in this the building that you see here. That's as high as the river has ever been in Daviess County, and hopefully we'll never get that way again. None of the other floods that we've experienced since then, the flood of '77 and whatnot, didn't come anywhere near this building. But the 1937 flood, they actually brought boats down where Highway 60 is now to get people and livestock out of here. But with regards to where we're at here today, what is particularly interesting is that the little structure that you see right behind me, our Bible chapel here, is the old train depot at Worthington Station. That is the original, the depot that was in existence right over here at the intersection of Steamboat Road, Murphy Road, right across from 60, about 1/8 of a mile from where you're standing right now. And in 1942, the church bought that from what had became, and is still now, the L&N Railroad, Louisville-Nashville Railroad. They bought it, they put it on wagons, and they moved it to where you see it is today. And since that time, it's been what we refer to as our Bible chapel. I was raised there. That's where I went to Sunday school. It's where we had our vacation Bible school. And it's still in existence today.
Back when we were young, people survived by farming. And they eat what they growed and growed what they eat. Then I guess the L&N Railroad was first real mode of transportation that I remember. And that came through in about late 1800s, 1890, somewhere in there. And it came through before the highway was built. This part of the highway was built in 1933, I think. That's what they got marked on the bridges.
When I was a kid, about 11 years old, and that would have been in 1947, I got to board the train and go to Louisville to visit my grandparents. And so I remember that as a kid, or I remember it as a kid.
We're on the railroad track here in Newman, on the corner of Highway 60 and Steamboat Road. Right across the road here was where the Bennett and Waite grocery was. It started out, James Hill owned it, and he was the first railroad agency right there, and it was a grocery store. And then he ended up selling it to Mr. Bennett in 1903. And then 2 years later, Mr. Waite bought half of it, so it became the Bennett and Waite grocery store. And that's where the railroad agency, that's where they sold tickets, and like I say, they walked across here. This is where they caught the train.
When I grew up, it was the Kruger Grocery, ran by a gentleman by the name of Chester Kruger, who lived where that trailer is immediately behind you there. And later, he sold to Buck Alexander, and for many years, and most people that are alive today remember it as Alexander's Grocery. In fact, there's a print of the grocery store that Rex Robertson, local artist, did back, I think, in about the 80s.
You could go there and buy a pair of shoes or a loaf of bread, whatever you wanted. The grocery people would have people come around once a week. They called them drummers. And they would pick up an order from the grocery people. And then next week they would deliver it.
And take another
order. Now, the bread company, which was Honeycrust, right?
Yeah, Honeycrust back then.
They would deliver the bread about 4 o'clock in the morning, but that was before the store opened, but they had a box on the front porch, and they just put the bread in the box, and that's how they got the bread.
We used to ride our bicycles up there, get gas for the lawnmower. You could do it in old glass jug back in, nobody said anything. It was 50 cents a gallon, and we could go in there and get penny candy. And the lady, Bessie Alexander, she'd load you up a bag of candy for a quarter, and you thought you had died and gone to heaven. It was pretty neat back then.
The old grocery was just, it was more than just a place to buy groceries, although that's what we did, because it was the only place we could buy them. And, you could go to Stanley and there was another little grocery. But for those of us around here, that's where we got everything. And so that's where everybody met. There was an old potbelly stove in there, and that's where, all the area farmers hung out there and talked. When we hunted, that's where we always came in to warm up. And I just grew up in that store, so when it went away, it was pretty sad,
Down the road piece there is where Happy Go Lucky Ranch is. And it was started by James L. Ellis. They call him Little Jim. It's James C. Ellis's nephew. And he was, of course, the Ellises all had a lot of horses years ago for a farming. And he was a hobby car man too. He started building Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch. He built the first building with a grandstand, held like 1,000 people for the horse shows. And then in 1968, they started having the Daviess County Fair. The Daviess County Fair moved from Enzer, Triple W Ranch, to Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch here in Newman. It was, they built another grandstand for where they had the tractor pulls. It held like 1,500 people. Then right next to it, they built another little track there that held 1,500 people for the micro midget race. It was a quarter-mile asphalt track for the micro midgets run. And then a year later, he built a big stock car track on the back there. It held 3,500 people. It was crowded all the time. People would come. Most of them were Saturday night races, but they had a few Sunday races. And that's where Darrell Waltrip got his start down here at Newman and at the Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch. But there was a lot of big-name NASCAR guys who came here over the years, and it appeared about 10 or 12 years, and they run it, and it was a big deal. And then, of course, 1972, it was the first time the Daviess County Lions Club moved from Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch to Philpott for their things. But for several years, it was a big event, the Daviess County Fair here. And I think in 1968, they had over 20,000 people who came to the fair. So it was quite a big deal.
I spent a lot of time over at the Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch, riding horses, selling horses, driving go-karts. You know, it was for a kid, it was a great place to live, to be right next to.
When the fair would go on, you see his airplanes fly over and they parachute jump out of it. You could watch them try to land on a target back there at the Happy-Go-Lucky Ranch.
Right about where you see me pointing here was where the horse barn was, where they had the livestock sales. Mr. E.W. Richmond, who was an auctioneer back in the 50s and the 60s from out on 81 South, was the auctioneer, I recall. And then that's where the horse show arena was. He later built as you travel north, he built the structure and the go-kart and the hobby car track. And then eventually, in the mid-60s, late 60s, he built a huge stock car track on the very back side of the property there. And that thing drew huge crowds on Saturday night. And that road actually, it's a dirt path now, and there's none of those structures exist anymore. It's all been cleaned up and it's all cropland now. But the old road bed still goes all the way north to Lake Town Road, and then crosses there and goes all the way to the river. And it's where I enjoy a lot of my time on my horse, just riding that old road and reminiscing of old times.
Over my right shoulder back here is Kimberly Clark. It was put in, and it was put in as Scott Paper, and it was Scott Paper for a few years before it was merged into Kimberly Clark. But anyway, 1991, that's when they done this redevelopment here of the highway here in Newman, and they put that. It's the biggest thing in Newman now. It's usually people associate the name Newman now they think of Kimberly Clark, and it was I think the building covers like 18 acres or 20 acres. Of course, they've been adding on lately. But at one time, there was, right there where that Kimberly Clark, there used to be a post office there called Dunbarton. It was the post office before the post office moved to Newman here. And because, like I say, after the railroad track came through, then they got mail service come through here, so they moved the post office here. So very little is known about the Dunbarton. But where the Kimberly Clark is right now, in the early 1980s, I think it was Jimmy Carter's administration, they were talking about putting a sand fuel plant down there, changing the coal and the gas and stuff, and it went on a couple of years. It was going to cost, it's millions of dollars. But anyway, they just dropped that. They just dropped the thing, so they didn't develop it. So about 10 years later is when they got started again, and I think it was Wallace Wilkinson, as the governor of Kentucky at the time. They got it going, and they ended up getting a plant built and everything. And it's a good job for a lot of people back there. A lot of people work there, and they was glad to get it, I'm sure. But some of these people who lived right here, they might not have been happy to get it, but I'm sure it's over a period of time, the feelings got changed, But it's a good place.
My dad was like so many people of his generation, and to some degree myself. Change was a horribly bad thing, and So I can recall when they were talking about bringing Scott Paper, it was called at that time, to this location, he just thought it was the end of the world. But obviously Scott Paper came in, I think that was in 1991, and I know County Judge Executive at that time was Buzz Norris. And Buzz and I used to have lengthy conversations. Of course, I was on the sheriff's office at that time. I would tell him what a horrible thing I thought that was for this community. First thing you got to understand, of course, is I grew up hunting. I hunted ducks north of me in Ohio River sloughs, and I hunted ducks to the south of me in the Green River. And Scott Paper is built on one of my best duck hunting holes. So, but it was a great thing for the community, and ultimately, in that case, change was good. Brought a lot of jobs to this area. But it's called Kimberly Clark now because I think Scott was absorbed into Kimberly Clark during a merger back, I think, in 1995, 96. But you know, when they did that, of course, they bought up a lot of ground over just south of us here. It's located just south of my farm down Innovative Way, and they had to widen the highway out here. A lot of the yards that you see, including mine, where we'll go down the farm in a minute, we lost 50, 60 feet because they had to widen the highway to accommodate the trucks and whatnot. But I guess the biggest change was, and I didn't mention, and I certainly should have, as my grandmother, James Kane's wife, lived on the farm since '42. She died on the farm. She was actually the postmaster here in Newman, and the post office was located in the old Alexander store that I mentioned. There was a corner cubicle, and she never drove a car in her life, and she always walked from the farm to the post office and back every day. And just like the old adage says, it didn't matter the weather, she walked it. And in fact, there was another resident that the house is no longer here, Maggie Kruger, which was about her age. She would always stop about midways, and they would discuss their flower gardens and things of that nature. And I grew up around that. And when the highway was widened and the structure came down, the old grocery came down, the post office was decommissioned, and so although there was a lot to gain there for those of us that grew up here with those memories, there was a lot lost too. So and I know it broke my grandmother's heart when that happened.
They tore 7 houses down, and they put 4 of them on stilts to haul them off, to move them. Anybody wanted one, or to buy, or if they wanted it for lumber. So they, in the name of progress, most of Newman was removed in 1991 because they had to widen the road here for the big turn to get in Kimberly Clark here. And that's kind of when Newman just became just a settled little community.
We're here on the Kane farm, that was the King farm. If you'll recall, I told you that my granddad purchased this from the King family back in 1942. But the barn that you see behind me used to be a wood structure that my granddad built, and it's actually where they had a garage here where they worked on the trucks for Kane Brothers Trucking. And the area that you see just right here next to me on the left, this would have been all gravel. And my dad actually had a fleet of about 32 trucks at one time. And in addition to hauling the grain, he would lease those out to the area farmers to assist them in getting their own crops in. So it was quite an operation here. And again, that's the environment in which I grew up in. But I can recall when I grew up, this was all an orchard. This was an apple, peach, and plum orchard right here. And the area that you see right here to my right that's grown up, that's the old Kruger farm. That was a dairy cattle operation there. So like I said before, it was a great place to grow up, and I've had the honor and the pleasure of not only growing up here with my parents, but my son grew up here, my granddaughters grew up here, and now my great-grandson Raylan. Can you say hi? Hi. Hi. He gets to grow up here too, so God's been good to the Kane family.
Well, visit Newman. There's a lot of good people in Newman. Yeah.
First thing you know about Newman is don't blink. If you do, you're gonna miss it. It's not a real big community, but everybody here helps everybody. Most of them is either they growed up here or their grandkids still live here or something. So everybody's kind of family oriented. Everybody knows everybody, you know. It just, if you need something, all you just pick up the phone or walk across the yard. Somebody's going to help you, regardless of what it is.
It's a caring community, and everybody's a neighbor and everybody's a friend. And if anybody's in trouble or needs help, that all the community is always willing to help.
Many people that have been here that don't know they've been here. Because I dare say if you asked a lot of people in the incorporated city limits of Owensboro where Newman, Kentucky is, they probably don't know. And you know, I completely understand that. If you look around, there's not anything here anymore other than the church. And of course those of us that live here. But so all the things that I've talked about have come and gone. But you know, it's just, it was a wonderful place to grow up in. It was a wonderful place to raise a family in, and it's a wonderful place to retire in. It's been my life, and I hope everybody can be as fortunate to have lived and experienced a place like Newman, Kentucky.